Mhm. All right. So what I did was, I'm going to open these files. Let's see here. The ones that I think you need to see right this minute. And this is a demo to explain how you use the quick mask to start to isolate a motif for project 6 for Design 103. And check that I'm recording here. Yes, I am. So I took this photo of a palm frond from my tree that they always fall down. And I thought, well, last night I said, how am I going to show them this? And I just had to take a photo of something. So I took a picture of this palm frond. I actually like the shape, and I like the shape in the middle too. So the negative shape. So I took it on my wall. I just hung it up on a nail and took it. So how are you going to isolate a motif to use? So that's the question. You know, what do you want to use and how are you going to do it and what you're going to put into this? It doesn't all have to be so object oriented. It could be something that has two areas, or you could even isolate a texture and geometric shapes. There's a lot of different ways that you could do this, but I took a shape or a thing, it's an object, to show you how to isolate an object. And you're working with photography in this. The art students can draw this. You could draw a motif the way I showed you some of the other students had done in my other classes, or design a motif. It can be flat areas of color or shape. It could be more graphic. So, but this is a photographic motif. And when I looked at it, I saw that I really liked the hairy shapes too. And that I knew was going to be a little difficult to isolate. So it might have been easier if I had actually drawn with the pen tool a little path around it, if you know how to do that. But what I did was isolate it. And the way I did that, I'll just tell you, was to take the shape on its background, and I selected with the quick selection tool the background. So I made my quick selection tool, which acts like a brush, bigger, and then I just moved it around and selected the whole background. So I'm selecting, and then I clicked in the middle and I selected that also. So I held shift to add to the selection. That's the way I do it, but also the quick select tool gives you options on the control up above. And then I went in here and to the hairy parts, and I added and subtracted. So I went in and I just sort of added and subtracted with the quick selection tool. You can also use the magic wand if you find areas that you find would be easier to select that way. And you might want to do a little tutorial on selecting if you really think that you're kind of at a loss with the selection. So you can go into lynda.com on the Art Center site and type in the tools for selecting that you want to learn. And then, so right now I have plus quick select. So I can add to the selection or subtract to the selection using the tools up above. So if you see areas that you that aren't in it and you want in it, right now I have the background selected. So I actually want to take away from the selection if there's things in it. And like right here, I want to take away from the selection. So I'm painting in the hairy parts. And I'm doing it right now with my mouse because I forgot to hook up my Wacom tablet. But I think this would be a lot easier to do with a Wacom tablet if you want to order one. I think that's a really good idea. So obviously it's going to be a little hard to get these hairy parts. So you want to select the background, not the hairs themselves. But then you could try with the mask to go with the magic wand tool to go in, increase your tolerance so that you get most of it. And the sample size you could make a little less so that you're getting just the browns that you want. And you could go in and add or take away from the selection that way. So I fooled around with that, trying to get as much as I could selected. I didn't do too good a job because I was doing this really quickly for you guys. So I think these are, now the way you can tell if things are selected is go to the quick mask tool, which is the little round circle under the foreground and the background fill colors on the toolbar. So go to the quick mask tool and you'll see that the quick mask tool shows you what's being masked or what's selected. So if you double click on the quick mask tool, it gives you these options. So masked areas is right now in red, 50%. This is the default. The thing that's good about the quick mask tool is that it shows what the object shows through, because the default is 50% of red, and it comes from the rubelith that used to be cut on copy cameras. I think I might have told you this. So with a long time ago, when the people did copy camera work and they were exposing certain parts of the image to be developed for reproducing, like for newspapers or magazines, photographs, so they wanted to develop parts of a plate and not develop other parts, they would put this stuff to protect the plate from being developed called rubelith. And I think that's where they got the red color. That's my theory. So they have this red color, which the default is that the red color are the masked areas, and the selected parts of it are the whiter unmasked areas. So the whiter part is unmasked and the red part is masked. So if I go out again and I click on quick mask, it'll show me now what I have masked. But if I want the red, the object that I took a picture of to be selected, you would just select inverse. So go to select inverse, and you're still in quick mask, so you have to get out of quick mask in order to do that. So it's a toggle. So you go out of quick mask, click on the quick mask tool again to get out of it, and now you just have your true selection in Photoshop. So now you have a selection, and what is selected is the background. So what you really wanted selected was the object, right? So you could go select inverse, and now you have your object selected. So I'm going to save it so that I don't have to go through this all again. So go to select, save selection, and I'm going to type frond because I want to know, what it is. So there's my frond. Now, another thing that you might want to know about is that in layer masking, if you make a mask out of this thing, I'm going to copy this background layer. So I'm going to make a copy first so that I have the thing that I started with. So go up to the drop-down menu and say duplicate layer. Say OK. And then you can turn this one off just so you still have it. And you can start working on this background copy layer. So when you're working on the background copy layer, you now have to decide what you want to do with this image, right? And my original idea was that I would isolate this thing from the background. I'm trying to cut it out from the background. So one thing that, okay, so let's just delete the background. Oh, I actually have the thing selected. So I have to go select inverse again. That selects the background. I'm going to delete it. So now I have the thing on a transparent layer. I mean, on transparent background, on transparency, because there's nothing there. But notice that some of it is kind of jagged. So you can actually paint that out by creating a layer mask. And there are different ways to do it. You could erase those pixels. Those are just pixels. So you can go in and you could use the eraser tool to erase around it. One thing that I think is useful is to put a layer mask on it, and that actually creates transparency. So then if you put a layer mask on this, and it's not the same thing as a clipping mask. So I'm gonna move this in so that we can all see it. Whoops, get rid of this right now. And move this over. And then I'm gonna move my palette here over so that you can see it. If, oh, trying to move my palettes. I wanna move layers, and here's brushes. So, okay, there's my palettes. And here are my layers. And you could put a layer mask on this layer by going up and saying, create layer mask, or you can do it in the bottom here. That's the best place to do it. So add layer mask to that. And what the layer mask does, oh, what did it do that? Huh. It shouldn't have gotten rid of that image. Oh, Oh, it's selected. There. Now let's try it. Okay, so now what you can do when you have a layer mask is you can trim this, paint away the parts that you don't want. Black takes away from the selection and white adds to the selection. You want the image to be linked to the layer mask. So I'm showing you two ways of using, creating a selection. You could have painted it away in the quick mask also. The same thing holds true of quick mask. You can paint in and paint out selections. So you want to bring your opacity up to, you want to be on the paintbrush tool. You want your opacity to be 100%, and you can paint out and in selections. So I just wanted to show you that. You can also do that in the quick mask tool if you have something selected. So you might want to take a little bit of a tutorial on that too. I put a layer mask on, and now I'm literally going to paint out. I'm going to take away from this selection. So with 100% opacity, I'm just going to paint my selection. So what layer mask, I don't know if most of you know what layer masks are, but whenever you're masking, you can paint, it affects the transparency of your pixels. So it's probably the best way to paint in and out parts of your selection. The backwards bracket makes the paintbrush smaller, and the forwards bracket makes it bigger. So notice that I can, these are pretty like delicate selections. So right here, for instance, a lot of it is still selected that I didn't want selected. So I go to my paintbrush tool and I just literally paint away the parts that I don't want. Okay. So that's one way of doing it. The other way before was to, and you can just go along the edge and clean up edges this way with layer masks. Or when you had it selected before, you can go into your quick mask and paint right on your quick mask when it's red and paint the selection the way you want, then toggle out of the quick mask. Notice I'm cleaning up my selection. Okay, so the other way would have been to do it right when you're in quick mask and you have it red, you can paint in and out with the white and the black right into the quick mask. then toggle out and you'll have your selection the way you wanted it. And you can then take away the background or, you know, whatever you want to do. So, you know, right now I'm just like cleaning up. Any questions? Ask me a question. So now I have my motif the way I want. So what am I going to do with it? Well, so I'm thinking about, I'm going to save it. And I'll say save as motif. I'll call this motif. And now I'm thinking to myself, what do I want to do with this motif? And I realized that I might want to use the golden section to reproduce it inside, And the golden section looks like this. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this motif? Well, I want to fit the first one, I decide, inside this square. And the second one's going to be in this square. And the third one's going to, oh no, the first one's going to be in the big square. So this is the big square that I'm going to put my motifs in. This is second, third, fourth, and all. Every time I've decided I'm going to rotate it. Every time it moves, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. But when I look at this motif, I thought that it was more of a square, but it's not. So I'm going to crop it, but it's still quite a bit of a rectangle. So maybe you like that negative space, or maybe you decide you're going to actually distort this and widen it. You could do that. So if you wanted to do that, you have to select the motif and go to Edit, Distort, and pull at it, and you could make it wider, which I did finally. But the main thing is I need a square. So how am I going to put it inside a square? So I'm going to try to make my canvas size square and then deal with the motif inside it. So how I'm going to do that, you can add to this, you can figure out what size your artboard is and then add to it. You can go to canvas size and make it a square. I'm going to look at the size of this first. So I'll do Command A, which is select all, which puts a marquee around the whole thing, and then go to Info, the palette called Info. And it'll tell you what size you just made because the marquee is active. So it's 42 by 56 inches right now. So 42 wide and 56 high. So that's quite a rectangle. So I'm going to my crop tool and I'm going to start cropping. So I'm going to pull at this and see what size my motif is. So right now it's 42 by 50. All right. So what I think I'm going to do is expand my canvas size to the size of the height, which is 50. So I'll make this exactly 50. And then the width is going to be 52 also, I mean. So you can do it two ways. You can just pull at it and expand the canvas size this way. I'm trying to make a square and then I'm going to worry about how my motif is going to be in it. Or you can go to Canvas, add to the canvas size. You can go up to the menu and say Image, Canvas Size, and add to it. We've done that when we added the swatches at the bottom. So now I have this, but it still doesn't do too much in the square. So what can you do to it? I think, well, maybe I'll use another one. So how do I make another one? So first I'm going to save once I've gotten it to this point, because I don't want to, so now I have to figure out, well, how am I going to make this? Well, to make another one, you have to select it. So let's select it. And again, I think it'll be easier to select the background because the background is all one flat color. It's a transparent color, but at least it's all the same. So I go to the magic wand tool, because that selects areas, and say sample all layers, and not contiguous. You're choosing a color that you don't want to choose the inside and the outside. So I choose this transparent background. It selected everything that is transparent. So now I can say select inverse again, and I'll have my object. Now I have the thing I wanted. So I'm going to copy it onto another layer. So do Command C, which is copy, make another layer. So let's go down to the bottom of the layers palette and say create a new layer. And I'm going to glue it onto this new layer, Command V. So now I have another one right on top of that one. And with the move tool, which is kind of like a selection tool in Photoshop, but you have to have something selected, I'm just going to move it over. So now I have two of them. And go back to the layer I was on, and I can move this one. So now you sort of have to decide what you're going to do with these. And they're going to fit into the square. So I'm going to rotate it and see what it looks like. So I'm just making this up. I've never done this one before. And I'm just trying to show you what, creatively you might think of. Now, I'm not saying that you all want to do duplicate ones. I'm just saying that's what I thought of. So I'm going to say, I'm going to rotate this one. So I have to be on the area, on the layer of the one I want to rotate. And I'm just going to say, edit, transform, and rotate. And I'll put a rotate box around the object on the layer that I'm on. And I can, it will let me rotate at the angle that I want it rotated. Whoops. Okay, wait a second. I can turn it, but I didn't really want to do that. I wanted it to be more exact. Usually it brings up a rotate box. So anyway, there's my rotate. And now I have two of them, and I start playing with it. I want to see if the negative space could be kind of interesting. And so there's maybe my final motif. Maybe you like it closer together, but I'm also thinking ahead and saying I want them to interact with each other when I put them into the golden section. So, I decide on this. The next step of it would be to, I think I'm going to move this one up a little bit so it's on that layer. There. So the next step would be, I better save again, because if you lose it, you've lost all your work. The next step is probably to put it into grayscale. So because you're inventing a motif that's going to be in your golden section. So I'm going to change it to grayscale because I'm going to be applying color to it. And when you do this, it's going to merge all your layers. So you could save this as something else so that the other one that you saved is still going to be there, because I'm going to save this as grayscale. Motif, grayscale, so that I keep saving them at different times. You could do this in layers too, but so there's my final motif. Now there's a lot that I can do with this one because it has a transparent background, meaning there's nothing in there right now. So I can start applying, I can put a layer and put color underneath, flat color, or some, other, like a gradient. I don't think you should work with gradients necessarily because that's bringing in a whole nother issue. But I'm also going to increase the canvas so I can start to, I'm going to increase the canvas size so I can bring in my blend that I'm going to make a palette out of. Or you can make your palette. I think what would be cool is maybe to make it in Illustrator ahead of time. but I'm gonna make my canvas size different. So it's gonna bring up, and I'm gonna add to the bottom. So you click on the top, remember I told you that, and I'm going to put about 4 inches at the bottom just so I can work with it. I already showed you how to do that. Now it gives me more room at the bottom, which you can crop off later. Or you can go backwards and put it right into your system just to see what it looks like. Command Z, there. I'm going to, right now, before I've done that at all, I'm going to put it into my system. So this is my file. So I'm going to say save. I saved it. And you can either select this whole thing and copy it the way it is, or you can place it into a document with your system in it. But I think what I'm going to do right now is the easiest way for me to do this, I think, is to copy it. So I'm going to say select all, Command A, and I'm going to copy the whole thing, Command C, diminish this, and go into this thing and make sure it's the right size. I had the other one at 50. Was that 50 inches? That's huge. You really don't want to be working that big. Was it 50 inches or 50? What was that? Let me look at it again. Yeah, so I don't really want it to be that big. I'm working huge, so it's going to make a gigantic, you could print this, a gigantic document. I mean, this would, you could be printing it at 50 inches. Oh, somebody wants to come in. Well, just to show you, I suppose, I think I'm going to make it a little smaller because this thing is going to be gigantic. So I'm going to change the image size here. Oh, it's at 72, no wonder. Okay, so I don't want to resample, but I'm going to put it at 300 and see what it looks like, or 200. Okay, so it's 18 by 18, which is fine. So I could actually print it fairly large at a good resolution. That's fine. So I'm going to save it that way again. (18 by 18). So we know that this square here has to be 18 by 18 or something like that. You can also make it, let's just go look and see what this document is, the one that I saved. So I'm going to change the size of it if I need to. So I'm bringing it into Photoshop. And checking the size, which is Control-Option-I. And notice that it's a lot smaller than Y. It's going to be low resolution, but it doesn't matter. I'm just using this as a guide underneath on the bottom layer. So I'm going to make it 18. The width is 18 now. So actually I want just this square to be 18, and we know that's going to be hard. So let's make it, we know that it's 1.6. So it's about 1.5. So I need it to be 18 plus 8, let's say 26, 18, is that 26? So 26 wide would be about what I need. And just because I'm making it rather large, and I'm going to now glue in the thing that I copied. So Command V. So there's my motifs coming in. And of course, they're much bigger. I thought I made this big though. It brought it in on a separate layer, on its own layer. So I can say Edit, Transform, Scale. And I'll put a scale box and I can start to make it much smaller, but it's huge. So I'm just pulling at the corners, but you could type in the scale box. I guess I should type in somewhere would be a better idea. but it's getting smaller. Where Otto could help me. He's really good in, so go into scale, and it's scaling down here, but it's not quite there yet. I'm just pulling at it. I can't, I have to look for where this, there it is. Well, transform is what I need, I suppose, but it won't let me, for some reason, do that right now. So I just keep pulling at it and making it smaller. And it's getting there. And I'm going to put it into, just to see what it looks like. Now, make sure that you have 2 layers here. Whoops. I just turned off my layer. So I'm going back into transform scale because I didn't get it quite right. And I want to make it fit into that box. That's, I guess, about as good as I'm going to get that. So when I turn off the diagram, you're going to be able to manipulate it. But every time now, I'm going to make some copies and keep turning them. So, okay, so I'll just keep selecting them and turning them. So when I go to this layer, I'm going to select these things, and you can go to edit, again, transform, and actually I just want to select them. So go to the I'm going to make some copies of this thing and put it so I can keep copying it now. So again, I'm going to select the background and then do the inverse to select these. Another way to do it, I think you could select them just by holding, doing the move tool, but I'm not sure it's going to move both of them or just one of them as a selection. So if you go to option and hold down, it should move a copy, and it moved both of them, which is just what I wanted. Now it put them on another layer because every time you make a copy in Photoshop, it puts it on a new layer. So now you've got a new layer. And when you're on this layer, you can scale these down. So go to edit, transform, and bring up your diagram again because you're going to transform and rotate it. So I'm going to first rotate it. So go to edit, you're on the layer that these things are on, and I'm going to say transform and rotate and put in 90 degrees. Well, I'm just going to turn it again. There is a 90, oh, it should have let me, there should be a dialog box somewhere, but I've got so many boxes up that I can't find it. So, oh, up here, you can do it right here. So do it right in here in the angle and put in 90, and it rotated it. And now I'm going to transform it. So edit, transform, and just do scale. And so I'm bringing it down to the size of that box. Notice this is another square. It should have let me, I'll fit it right into that square. And I'm just going to keep going, keep rotating and see. Now, what I'm trying to do is see if I can get some continuity in the negative. That's what I'm really interested in. So if I keep going, you'll see if your motif, this one doesn't look like it's doing such a fantastic job, but you're going to be able to manipulate the layers a little bit. So the next one I'm going to do, I'm on the layer where I made this copy. So I'm going to option click it again and make another one, rotate it. So I made it, this is the new layer. So I rotate it. So you want to be, what did I do? Oh, shoot. Oh, Command C. I'm on that layer and you want to say edit, transform, rotate, and another 90. Bring it down into the new square. This is only because I'm using the golden section. Hit return when you want to affect a change, but you're on the layer where you can work with this motif and go to transform again. And this time I'm scaling. So I'm alternating between scaling and rotating, only because it's the golden section. And then, you know, when you're ready, you can look and see what this looks like when you turn off your, you know, and maybe you stop at the next one, or maybe you go a little bit smaller. Then you can start to color them. Now, I would color the motif before you do all this rotating. So I think what I might do, it might be easiest to get it into the form that you want. But let me do one more rotation, but I have to have my diagram up. So you do need a diagram, and I told you to do that in project, part B, which I told you to do for this time. So I'm going to rotate it one more time. So do a hold option to copy and make another copy. Notice that in Photoshop, you can't use the clipboard. Illustrator is easier that way. You can, you know, it still shows up if you have put it on the clipboard. But in Photoshop, you can't. There it is again, not quite right. There. And then hit return to affect the change, and then go to edit, transform, scale. And did you notice what's under transform? A lot of different ways that you can manipulate the image in transform. So it's edit, transform. Okay, so this is my motif in the golden section. Now, there's just a lot that you could do with this, obviously. Should I do one more? And then I'll show you what it looks like. So option, make another one. And bring that over here and rotate it. Oh, it was, I think it was supposed to be this way, right? Whoops. And that's about right already. So, okay, so what now could you do with it in terms of color? Well, so you can go back to the beginning and use motifs that are colored, or you can go in and start coloring now. For instance, I could put a background color in. So right at the bottom, you could actually make a layer above this layer and say new layer. Now you have a layer above the design layer. And you can dump color into this layer simply by going to your paint bucket tool and dumping a color in. So if I go to swatches, now I say, what's going to be my color palette for this? So this is, you know, you're working in Photoshop because you're photographers. You could also do this in Illustrator, and it might be easier to do it in Illustrator. Bring your motif into Illustrator and use that motif right in Illustrator. That might be the easiest way, because in Illustrator, it's easier, I think, to copy things and to manipulate them. But you can't do the masking and erasing anymore. If you bring it into Illustrator, it has to be just the way you want it. And it's also, if you bring a TIFF into Illustrator, you can colorize it. So you have to know these programs a little bit. I think for a lot of you, it'd be easier to do it in Photoshop because you feel more familiar with Photoshop. So I was going to show you how to put a blend underneath and start sampling from the blend. So I need to increase the bottom. So increase the canvas size right now. So I'm going to go to image, canvas size, and increase the canvas size at the bottom. So you click on the top to do, whoops, I didn't click on the top, and make it a few inches bigger at the bottom again. Oh, it did it on the side. Whoops. Go to canvas size, click on the top, and I'm going to make the height 4 inches at the bottom so that I have room to paste my blend. In Illustrator, I'm going to go into Illustrator, open it in Illustrator, and go to your last project and pick a blend that you like. So I'm going to pick this one, copy it. Oops, this is grouped. So object ungroup. Let's hope that I still have this one. Yeah. So copy this one, Command C, or you could pick some of the swatches from that and use them that way. But I'm going to do that in Photoshop. So I copied it just now, and then I'm going to close my Illustrator document and go back into my Photoshop one and glue it in there. And it's going to come in a new layer, Command V. It's going to ask me how I want to bring it in. I'm just going to say pixels. And I bring it in, bring it down. I've shown you this in Project 5. And make it bigger so you can sample from it. And now you can start to use your complementary blend. You also did a monochromatic one. You did 3 monochromatic ones, so you can use those. With the triadic ones, you're just going to have to make the 3 colors, make some tints and shades, and use them. So there you're going to have to be more inventive because we haven't done it yet. But go back to your color wheels and pick 3 triadic colors. So with this one, I'm going to dump a color as a background color in. And you can go to the layer that you put right over your diagram layer. And just dump color right in. Can I bring this up here? Yeah, there. So watch what happens when I dump color into, this is transparent right now, but it's going to let me, if I go to my paint bucket, there's various ways to do this, but you can just dump color into a layer, but you have to decide what color. So let's say I decide I want the color to be sort of one of this beautiful neutral bluish color. I'm going to take my paint bucket and just dump it into that layer. Now notice that I didn't get it in there, so I got to like go through and put it in. Baby. Okay, so this is the golden section. Do I like that? Maybe. You know, it's also right now in grayscale. So I'm going to want you to paint these. Luckily, they're on their own layers. So you can either flatten these as a new, you can flatten them all, or you can go from layer to layer and paint them. And maybe you want to paint all of them a little differently. So when you paint, you have to select again. So you can easily select these by selecting the background and doing inverse, or finding a different way to select them if you have something more complicated. So I'm just going to start painting. And you know how to paint them because I showed you how to do multiply and paint an object, or you can paint it more opaquely. Or you can keep painting it. For instance, I'm going to turn off these layers. Right now, I'm just going to paint this one, and I'm going to paint them all different colors as they move in. Maybe I'll just paint right along my blend here. So I'm going to turn everything off. Actually, even here, it might be easy to do it, but because it's kind of masked. But I'm going to turn off things that I don't want to paint. And by the way, when you move in layers in Photoshop, you just move up and down and turn things off. So this first one, actually, I want the blend on. So I might have to put that blend, I should have put the blend on a different layer. That's kind of interesting problem. But I can select that, and I should have put it on its own layer. So make sure you put that on its own layer. I don't know if I can do that right now. Maybe I have to turn off that layer, select the color first, and then turn off that layer. But anyway, I'll just show you how to color. So I'm going to start with red. So I select the red, turn off this layer because I don't, but the red is still selected. Go to my paint tool, go to multiply, and this layer is on, so I should be able to paint. It's not letting me. Why?
You have to be in that layer.
Thank you. Who is that?
Pierce.
Thank you, Piers. And do I have to, I also have to select these, right? Yeah, because it's going to paint on the transparency as well, right? So select the background, select inverse. Okay, now I can paint it. If you don't like that because it's too dark, you could have made those lighter just by making them more transparent, the black. You can go backwards and make those look more transparent. What they're selected, I'll go backwards. Okay, so now they're back, and I can say, I want this layer to be transparent, double click on the layer, whoops, and say, make it more transparent, the layer itself. So I double clicked on the layer and made it more transparent, and then I can paint it. Whoops, sorry. And I should be able to paint just those. So I have to do inverse again. But, oh, maybe it won't let me because I made that layer transparent. Anyway, you'll figure that out. I made the whole layer transparent, so maybe it won't let me then do that. I liked it better the way I did it. Oops. You have to have them selected. So I'm going into my history palette to where I did that. Where was I when I did that? Well, okay. What's the shortcut for select inverse? Select inverse. It's Shift Control I. So I'm going back to. Anyway, you'll figure out how to make them more transparent if you don't like it so dark. And then bring back this one and keep going. So you can turn off the ones you just did and then do these, et cetera, et cetera. But it'll take a while and you'll figure it out. But you have to, and you'll use your friends to give you advice. You might not do, I'm doing the golden section, which was kind of a little bit complicated for me to choose. Also, I happen to like the negative space that's happening. So notice that there is a negative thing going on in this. But I think it would be cool if they were actually touching, or maybe if you put a gradient behind them. I don't know, whatever. Okay, ask me questions. I basically was trying to show you how you would use the golden section to repeat something, and you're going to have to know a little Photoshop to do this. It's definitely time consuming. But I'm not painting them all the same color. I'm going to go right down
So let's
the
say
red.
for like a,
What? Eric?
sorry.
Is that Eric?
Yeah. I was wondering, like, if let's say we're doing a mandala for ours, would we have to make our own template for mandala or
You can get it, but you know, mandalas are, you can pronounce, and they're different, it's pronounced different ways.
Yeah.
They're just a circular arrangement. So they've been used in so many different religions and so many different cultures, including the Maya and the Aztec, all the way back to all these Eastern religions. You just have to research which one you want to do. One person got really involved with the Celtic mandalas because they were very narrative about the elements that they were interested in the world, and their whole philosophy about what elements were important, like water, wind, earth, and fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember the exact Celtic, narrative, but one person did the Celtic mandala. So mandalas have been different. You can pick your own mandala.
Okay.
They've also been used for calendars, tandials, things like rituals, different Colosseum type or theater in the round or whatever those, what are they called? Those where they, stadiums are made that way. So the mandala is so ubiquitous in all over the world. You see it. You just make your own. Now you don't use my rotate. I told you how to rotate around a circle. So that would be pretty easy. You could take this Motif Illustrator and rotate it, but you still have to color it. So you've got that problem.
Yeah.
But you could color it in Photoshop just by selecting areas. This is a lot more complicated what I did. And in this case, what I'm saying is the way that I've arranged them, and it looks pretty natural, doesn't it? But it's the golden section.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was
my question. Yeah.
It feels good, right? The proportions of this feel good.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good then. Because I mean, I'm pretty familiar with Photoshop, so I'll probably be doing everything in Photoshop.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm better at Illustrator. Illustrator is my program. I actually am not. I wouldn't consider myself an expert Photoshop user. I'm kind of advanced intermediate. I know how to do things, but it takes me a while. So, but I like what this is starting to look like. You can also, a lot of people who use the golden section actually went back to the diagram and colored the sections different colors too. Mm-hmm. So you can work behind it. You can, well, you say you're familiar, you can work at the bottom here too with color. So maybe you do all these things in red, right? Okay, it's a female motif. This is kind of, female, I don't know. Let's say, okay? So then I made this up, by the way. I took this photo last night. So I've never done this before. So I'm just like improvising. But you could go into this and do blues. You could go into the section here and color all those sections different blues. So you could use the left side to do the background and the right side to do the objects. And I mean, I'm just going now, I'm like, just improvising.
Okay.
So I'm drawing, I'm painting with my motif. Jennifer, hi. What do you think?
I'm sorry.
Are you just back? Did you just come back?
No, well, I was just like overhearing my parents because I think they were like calling me to eat, but I was like, I'm not hungry. I don't know. It was like weird.
Okay, go eat.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll
How's
stay.
Florida? Anyway, yeah,
Yeah. What was the question?
nothing. Just, you know, if you'd been observing, if you had anything to
Yeah.
say.
I think that red is really beautiful though. I was like looking at it. I really like it. And I think,
Yeah, it's
I think
dark
it's,
red.
yeah, but it's very nice and bright, especially like on that blue. I think, yeah, I like it.
So you have to do 4 of them, everyone. And yeah,
I have a question.
yeah.
So for the art students, if we design something in Illustrator, do we then have to transfer it to Photoshop and make a Photoshop file? And
No, I'm not asking you to work in one program or the other. You work in either.
okay.
I think we should keep it maybe to Illustrator and Photoshop because those are the ones I can help you with the best. If
Yeah, that's
you,
fine.
I mean, and our center tends to be sort of Adobe oriented. Adobe gives us 2 full scholarships for students, and it gives us a lot of stuff. Like now they're giving us all these free programs until until this quarantine thing ends. You know, I think we have a relationship, Art Center, with Adobe, but if there was another program that you were super familiar with and you preferred, I'd let you do that. But I think Illustrator and Photoshop are the ones that I could help you with.
No, that's fine. That's the only question. Thank you.
I have a question, Joan.
Yeah.
For these, when you said we can also draw them, well, is that, cause I made like just little designs based on like, I think they're called, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the word of this like pattern, but basically, or motif, but so now with what you're doing, I mean, I don't know if you want us to just specifically use photos or just like shapes. But my question is so I don't know what you prefer is one question. And then my other question would be if we wanted to work with like shapes that we made in Illustrator, would that be possible? Like kind of like the first assignment where we had those shapes and then make a pattern from that, or?
That's fine. If you don't want to do photography right now, I mean, the other classes mostly working graphically, I think. They're drawing their own motifs. We have 5 art students in here. Some of them, well, Alex is using photography already, but he doesn't have, if we have art students, so you could draw them, you could use your textures, you could use both, you could draw and use photography. Whatever, you know, is your fancy right now. This is up to you, totally up to you. My other class is drawing almost everything because they're Illustrator, ad, and graphics students. So I think they're drawing most of it. The graphics students are probably going to do it more graphically.
Right.
And to do everything more flat. But whatever, no, I have no, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Whoops. What was that? Maybe you want to do a few ideas and then see what you like best. That's why I asked you to do 3 to 5 ideas, because just be loose about it. And I had no idea what I was going to do with this thing. I photographed it on my wall last night because it happened. I have a lot of them that fell down in the rainstorm. So like as you had to go around and photograph textures around your immediate environment. You know, we can make art wherever, right? That's what artists, we're really creative. So you're all locked up in your houses right now and we're making art. So, yeah, I don't mind what you do. There should be some, yeah, there were just like creative motifs. And we're using motif as a visual motif. It could be a picture of anything or a drawing of anything. It could be like little just doodles. Jennifer did a, say it, I don't, what's that thing called? The oso or oro? Oros. It was the snake eating its tail.
Yeah,
Jennifer,
Ouroboros.
yeah,
Ouroboros.
the oro, she had like 3 or 4 motifs and she decided on the snake eating its tail.
Yeah, honestly, looking back at it, I always think like I complicated my life reconsidering what a motif was, and then I'm like, it's so simple. It's really like it's just anything that is just repeated over and over again, which is just like a pattern too, and putting it into a system. Honestly, I realized that so much later.
The idea here is that there's different proportions to help you repeat that have been used historically. And you'll just be delighted. You'll start working with your motif and seeing it in the system. All of a sudden you're like, wow, that works.
Yeah.
That's a way that I can repeat it.
So, and I have another question. So we have to do 4 of them total, or did you want to do 4 ideas and then you pick one that?
Well, we're going through parts A and B right now. And actually for today, you were supposed to have part A and B done. So you were like drawing your motifs and putting and trying to choose a system, right? And you're all going to start showing me your ideas. Eric already sent some, so he can go first. So I'll just like have my little windows up here and you can say, I'm next, you know, but I could also make a list, but I think to save time, you can just volunteer. So, yeah, I think I'll just start looking at your motifs. Now, you need to tell me, I think I'm going to put this into like, if you think you're going to put it into a mandala, for instance, and it's just really boring, like a little triangle, I'm going to say make it more complicated. If you think you're going to use it in a grid and you make an incredibly complicated one, I'm going to say simplify, because this is a ridiculous thing to repeat 30 times, you know? So if it's going to be repeated a great deal, then maybe you want it to be simpler. If it's only going to be repeated, if you're going to use the rule of thirds, maybe you need it to be more complicated because there's only going to be 3 of them.
Okay, so because I do have a couple, so do you want me to email them to you, or do you want me to just like show you? Because I have them.
No, I'd like to start looking right now. So I'm going to diminish this. I'm going to save it and diminish it. And then I'm going to look at Eric's, then I'll look at yours. And I want everybody to see me this week. So you need to make times. I'm around, I'm here to see people, but I hope to go through right now, about half of you. And then the rest of you are going to have to see me at different times so we can go back and forth about a good time to see me in the next week.
Okay.
So first I'm going to see Eric, and then I'll see Andrea, and then I'll see about 3 more people, and hopefully by 7 I'll have seen 8 of you. And then this week, if I don't get to that many, you can email and just name a time that's good for you, and I'll tell you whether it's good or not. Or a day. In the next 3 or 4 days, I need to see people because I want to talk to you about what you're going to do. It's due in week 15. So we have 2 more weeks, which gives you enough time to do this. But I would like, if you get it done early by any chance, I'd like to collect them, start putting them into a folder next week, because, you know, in week 15, it's going to be hard to go through everybody. It's going to take us the whole period, the whole 5 hours, I'm sure. It's really fun to see what people did, because people are very creative with this. And yeah, so I think since we need the whole period in week 15, I think it'd be better if we collected them in 10 days, started collecting, you know, like we did today. We did the, project 5, we've seen practically everybody, but we had to do it in 2 groups. We don't have that luxury in week 15, and that's the last week of school. So you have 2 weeks, you know, this week and then next week to finish this. Don't make it too complicated. Don't be too hard on yourself about this. So what I want to see right now is your motif. Choose one today and in the next couple of days, and then start putting it into a system. Do it in grayscale, the way I did first. The first thing you have to do is pick your motif, then put it into grayscale. That's part B. And then the next parts, the part C, is to do 4 color studies, and then pick one as your final that you think is the best and make it into something else, maybe make it bigger. In this case, I think my final would just maybe be a few more repeats moving inwards right in the center here, and that would be my final piece. You know, you don't have to make something bigger, but let's say you only did 3 across and 3 down, and you decide, oh, it'd be nicer if I had more of them. And so you just to see what it looks like with, if you're doing a grid, for instance, you have 3 across and 3 down, you've applied color 2. Well, then you'd pick one of those and say, what would it be like if you had 9 across and 9 down, and just see what it looks like. You know, maybe that would be a way of making it into a better final piece. In this one, like I say, I think my final would just be this, maybe going smaller right here. Or maybe not, you know, maybe I just pick one of my color studies and that would be my final. That would be fine. If I feel like there's some effort applied to this and some thinking, and you picked a good motif and you've applied color in a beautiful way, that's all that I'm asking. All right, so I'm going to start seeing people. I'm going to turn off the recording. This is for the people that weren't able to watch, but this should be a helpful recording for those who were not able to see the demo themselves. There, stop recording.